We're gonna be building a computer right now that's probably gonna push $10,000. Fortunately, we have most of the parts already, but I was like, you know, we've been slowly kind of getting rid of all the Intel stuff around here, I guess with the exception of me, because I just went 285K for a long-term experiment, which I'll shoot that video for you guys soon. It's been about a month since I switched to that system. Some interesting stuff to talk about there. But anyway, I was like, Phil's been editing on a 14900K. Is it 14 or 13900K, Phil?
13900.
Okay, so Phil's on a 13900K. We know that that's potentially a ticking time bomb. It's one we've had since before all of the degradation stuff happened. And I've noticed Phil getting frustrated more lately with weirdness in his computer and Adobe crashing and stuttering and stuff. And it's hard to say whether or not that's just Adobe being Adobe or Intel being Intel, or those two looking like the handshake meme of how much can we fuck this guy over today. Now, obviously with that price point that I just sort of stated, which I do not recommend, I do not think it's necessary, especially for what we do around here, but we have the parts, so why not use them? We're not gonna hit $10,000 this month on a mainstream PC. That's next month's price increase, not this month's, but anyway, I digress. We're gonna be using Threadripper. Phil has not used Threadripper in a main rig since back in like the first gen Threadripper, like the 1950X. And that was kind of a nightmare for Phil because just like the early days of Ryzen, there was also the early headaches that came along with all of that, like memory instability, constant crashes, just software and schedulers in Windows not really knowing how to utilize quad CCD configurations. A lot has changed though. The 9000 series Threadripper stuff is pretty freaking insane. I was gonna put a 9970X in there because we have a 9970X and a 9980X. Which is funny because those were both Intel SKUs about 10 years ago. But anyway, what a weird world we live in today. But the 9970X is a 32 core, 64 thread part. So it's got basically 4 8-core, 16 thread CPUs in it. In fact, if you look at the back, you can see how they're even segmented. They're literally 4 CPUs fused together on the substrate, which is kind of neat scaling, right? But I went, you know what, screw it. Let's throw the 9980X in there, which is a 48 core, 96 thread monster. So anyway, 9980XE is $5,000. It's quite the CPU to be using to render videos, considering most of the encoding is going to take place on the GPU anyway. However, this allows Phil to be able to have all of his suites open at the same time, but more importantly, the clock speed has definitely improved with 9000 series. I think we were getting, I can't remember what our scores were, but I think it was north of like 130,000 score in Cinebench R23, if that tells you anything. Now, obviously with a CPU like that, one of the ways we're making the cost go up exponentially is the fact that I'm being very careful with these. 128 gigabytes of 6400 megatransfers CL32 ECC registered RAM. It's out of stock everywhere. Gee, I wonder why, but Micro Center had it for $1,400, which tells you everyone else probably had it for $2,000, to be honest. But these are ECC. This CPU can run both ECC and non-ECC RAM. We figured why the hell not just run the ECC stuff because of the fact that it's gonna help with stability issues if we run into memory as being a problem for stability. I doubt we're going to. The CPU is pretty damn solid. We're gonna be running a T700 drive. That's another way the 2 terabyte drive, that's another way the price is going through the roof. Phil is basically gonna take his Intel rig. We're cloning the drive right now so that we can throw it in here. And then he's got some other 2 terabyte NVMEs in there for like scratch disks and stuff like that, or short-term storage before he offloads from it. So Phil takes all of our raw footage when we're making a video like this one, and he puts it directly onto his rig, but he also backs it up onto our server. But he doesn't edit off the server because he's the only editor. There's no point in having an editing server if you don't have multiple people working on the same project at the same time. So when he's done with the project, he then moves everything over onto our server, which is just basically a backup. But the cool thing is a scratch drive on there. That way when he's moving along the timeline, having a drive dedicated to just that raw footage keeps things moving pretty quickly. Now here's the thing, because of the amount of drives that Phil has on his system means he's been bifurcating. And the cool thing about this is there's so many freaking lanes, bifurcation is no longer gonna be a problem. Phil will actually get full drive speed on everything that he has plugged into that system. So that's something we're kind of excited about. It's kind of an accidental side effect that we weren't even considering that just like was realized. But we need to go to Micro Center today. There's some things we need. This is the cooler that we have for the Threadripper. I don't want to utilize it though. I kind of want to get another one. I know they have the same Silverstone there because I do want to keep another Threadripper station able to be run for benchmarks and things like that. So today's video will also include the ultimate, did this do us any good? Because we're going to take a video that we've already aired and we're going to do the rendering and coding time on the Intel rig. Remember, it uses quick sync and all that sort of stuff, whereas this doesn't have that. But this is brute force method. So let's see what happens and whether or not this was worth it. At the very least, Phil was like, yeah, it could be fun to play around with this, considering his preconceived notions on whether or not this is worth it is really skewed based on the bad experience of first gen Threadripper. But this is like 5th gen now. So let's see if it's improved. But first, let's go get some stuff. Oh, and I need I might get a different power supply for our test station over there. You guys saw that video. So, all right, we'll see ya. All right, so this is the board we're going with. This is the Asus Pro WS TRX50-Sage Wi-Fi workstation motherboard with PCI Express 5.0 ready, quad channel DDR5 memory, and NVMe SSD ready. Could you imagine if it didn't support SSDs? I'm just looking for AI. It's got to be on here somewhere. Anyway, there's only 3 SKUs. Like, Threadripper stuff is not very popular. I mean, it's a very specific type of crowd that would be looking for that. But there's 2 Asus SKUs and then a Gigabyte SKU. I'm not doing the Gigabyte one for shallow reasons. It's white. And I have that board already, but we need that for our test station for Threadripper. So this is just a fairly basic board. I mean, I say basic, it's not really. It's a, as you can see, it's a pretty solid board right there. It's EATX though, for sure. So we need to make sure whatever case we get fits EATX. So let's go there. Actually, before that, yeah, let's go to the case first before we decide on the cooler, because the case determines what cooler we could fit. I like the simplicity of the tough case, because it's got the 3 420s as an intake. Obviously, the grill is not blocking any airflow, as you can see. I think we could potentially even fit a 420 AIO in here, because that's the thing. If I can get a 420 Threadripper AIO, I would want to do that. The 360 should be fine, but let's face it, it can definitely pull a lot of heat. I ain't trying to go all Asus or nothing with this. I was actually looking to see if they had any of their workstation or their ProArt cases, because we wanted to use ProArt in the past, but it wouldn't fit any of the stuff. Okay, so here's the ProArt we were actually looking for, right here.
I like that one.
Phil's like already putting in his vote. I want that one.
Look at the front, that looks cool.
Yeah, it's got big fans in the front.
It's all radiators.
You love the big engine grill looking stuff. So it's Phil's PC, and he went, I want that one. So, all right, Phil's made his choice. I think it supports everything we need. Yeah, so we'll take this one, sure. And it's cheaper than we thought. It's like $250 or something like that. All right, so this is a Thermaltake AW420 AIO. It's a Fan X3, that's good to know. Anyway, so this is designed specifically for Threadripper. If you take a look right here, you can see it's got it says LGA 4677 or AMD TR5 and SP6. Like, that's like the server mount stuff for Xeon and the Threadripper. So we want that because we don't want a standard AIO that has a small cold plate. Because I showed you the size of the CPU earlier. It is massive. So we're gonna go with this. Which one's cheaper? $450. Yeah, I just realized it's $450. Well, we gotta get to 10K somehow, right? So it's not the goal. I just think we're gonna end up there. Kind of like Denny's. No one ever goes to Denny's. You just end up in Denny's. Perfect power supply right there. That is actually not even enough for the CPU underload. Anyway, they got pretty wiped out on some of their high watt power supplies. So I think we're just gonna use our 1500 watt Corsair that we have. I have a brand new one. And then I'll just use one of the cable mod direct to Corsair to GPU cable that I showed you in our previous video regarding how I do not like Corsair's ATX 3.1 cable. So anyway, there's that, we don't need that. We have everything else. We have CPU, we have RAM, we have storage, we have fans, power supply. Here, we're only getting motherboard and cooler and case. Yeah, those things add up to a lot of money right there. It just feels weird spending, like, having a PC that's gonna be worth this much. Like, we don't need it, but we have it. I'm curious what this all adds up to, okay? So, CPU, 5,000. Stupid. RAM, can't find this kit exactly for sale, but what I did find is the last price Micro Center had it for, which was $1,400. $500 SSD. All right, so plus 500 for the other 2 drives total that Phil has. The total of parts that we just spent at Micro Center before tax was $1634, and that is the case, the motherboard, the cooler, and some fan splitters. I'm gonna be using the Fantex T30 fans on this build. A little kind of a baked-in mini review of these, actually. These are such cool fans. I love these fans. First of all, the color of them, it's freaking awesome. That's the LCP is the liquid crystal polymer. So they have like kind of a forged look. It's kind of like forged plastic, honestly. They're fiber reinforced. That's why they're super heavy. Vapo bearings, which is like a high pressure sealed fluid bearing system, which makes literally no noise. There's no buzzing, no nothing. So I just figured because we have enough of these and they just came out, the 140s are new actually. They announced these at Computex last year. They're 2,500 RPM fans. They even have a toggle switch in the hub so you can change the fan speed if you want between hybrid, which is 1,200 RPM, performance, which I believe is 1,800 RPM or 2,000, and then advanced is 2,500 RPM. So we'll just leave them on the max setting and then Phil can control it through the header. But the motor doesn't make any noise either. It's a 6-pole motor. So yeah, it's apparently the longevity on these is supposed to be insane. We've used the 120s for a while. 120s came out a while back, like a couple years back. The 140s were a bit delayed, and here they are. So I can actually go push-pull on these, and I think that's what I'm gonna do, and then we'll talk about those a little more as we put them in. Anyway, these are $30 a fan. They're not cheap, but they're pretty premium. Don't have the 4090 accounted for. That's still going for a solid $2,000 today. This is an $11,500 build. I don't think I've ever built a PC that's this expensive and yet this basic, if you want to know the truth. All right, I'm gonna take you guys along for the ride of installing the CPU because I think a lot of my audience probably has never seen a Threadripper installation. I think a lot of my audience has, obviously, but I'm gonna show you guys this. It's pretty interesting because it's a cassette and it throws a lot of people off. When it comes to installing the CPU, you need to have, and this is where a lot of people mess up, you need to have the Ryzen torque wrench, the Threadripper torque wrench. This is actually predetermined to the specific torque needed to make sure all the pins are making contact. So I'm gonna go ahead and take this off real quick in reverse, 3, 2, 1. Back in the day when this first came out, so many people thought they had bad CPUs or bad motherboards because they just weren't paying attention to the installation order. It's labeled 3, 2, 1. And then it says for when you close, you go 1, 2, 3. And what I like to do is get them all sort of snuggish and then torque them down 1, 2, 3 in order, rather than going all the way torque on 1 and then torque on 2 and then torque on 3. But as you can see, very big cover, these 2 blue tabs. You gotta pull those back. Take off the socket cover. If you were scared of hitting pins before, there's, well, 4 times as many of them. Then what you do is you pull out this, right? So these are technically your socket protectors right here. Hey, it actually matches the fan.
Nice.
Whatever. Probably the same type of plastic anyway. Okay, and then what you do, when the reviewers first got Threadripper and they first started coming out, people were like trying to remove it from this sled and like get it finagled on there, but that's not what you do. You literally slide it in, make sure it doesn't pop off. So you just slide it down like that till it seats, it will click. Okay, pull that down, push down on the blue, snapped in. Then you take down the cover, hold it with your finger, and then just give some turns on 1 so it doesn't pop up. There we go, just go. See how it popped up? Just go a few turns, stop, do 2, do 3. Once they just sort of stop with like finger tight, then go to 1 and go for the torque wrench click. There we go. Now go to 2. And then go to 3. There, that's it. People were using like iFixit toolkits and T-handle toolkits and over tightening, and that was causing us some flexing of the CPU substrate, and then pins would make contact. The number one indicator that it wasn't making contact would be obviously a no post or something like that, but you might have gotten a post and then noticed later an entire RAM channel was missing or something. So that was pretty common. I just thought some of you that maybe have never seen that would find that interesting. This is a very basic build. There's nothing to really talk about throughout this process. Phil has already done a render on the 9850X3D video we did, so we'll compare and see if this is any faster, but first let's get it together and Hopefully it won't take too long. That Gigabyte card actually looks pretty good in there, even though it's a little dirty, because it, like the forged plastics, if you will, of the fiber reinforced fans from Fantex and the gunmetal on the card, the cable mod cable that I'm using to not use the Corsair cable with the 90 degree, and then the chrome and stuff. It looks really nice. And then the top, we could not fit push-pull, no matter how much we tried. And even though it says it fits a 420 AIO, it does not fit it comfortably. In fact, it's not even screwed down because I cannot get it pushed forward far enough to get the screws in the back to actually line up. They're like a half a screw hole away. So it looks like a half moon, which is fine. It's so pressure fitted in there, it ain't going anywhere. The other thing too is, well then Jay, why don't you just flip the tubes? Well, when I did that, the tubes impact the front fans, which as you can see, stick out into that area. Couldn't go push-pull because there's just not enough room under this. It's intended for a 30 mil under the bracket and up to a 34 mil above the bracket. So that's why, even though I have 30 mil fans on the top, you can see I still have clearance before the fan filter, which is nice because that'll help with acoustics. But because I'm going intake, the filter needs to stay on the top, obviously. And that just gives us the coolest air possible to our AIO. So we're all intakes on this with the exception of the rear exhaust. But because we have so much ventilation, like all the IO covers in the back are ventilated, there's all this ventilation here. This will give us, I think, the best cooling scenario. So now we need to make sure it posts. Here's the thing about Threadripper. Depending on the amount of RAM, because we have 128 gigs of RAM, it will, no joke, take anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes for it to do its first posted memory training. It takes forever, and that sucks because it happens on any restart unless we deal with memory context restore, which can still do it even on a power loss. So I'm gonna push the power button, but I won't know for about 10 minutes. It should show me at least postcode 15 down here. The nice thing is this board has a actual Q code readout. The other board, the Gigabyte board that we have, doesn't. It just has LED. And the thing is, the LED just hangs on RAM when you go to post. So it doesn't tell you it's hanging on RAM because it's training or because it failed. In different phases of training, that LED for the RAM can show white, it can show orange, it can show red, and it will cycle through that as it's training. So let's just make sure everything works fans-wise and stuff. We got this toggle switch. I wanna say this though, I probably won't ever use this case again, to be honest. This is one of those examples of a case that is big, where it doesn't matter, and it's small where it matters. And that applies to so many things in life. But with that said, like the AIO thing I talked about, I can't put the shroud back on, the cable shroud, because the USB-C cable right there and the front panel cable that comes with this. So it's an ASUS motherboard. I need to point this out. This is Ecosystem. It is a WS motherboard that you would assume would be test fitted with their own ProArt, which is a workstation case, but it's such a tall header, and because the header sticks up 90 degrees and doesn't point straight out, it doesn't clear the shroud. It literally doesn't clear the shroud. It's too tall for the shroud to fit over it. And I can't put any more bend on it because I'm already bending it right at the plastic. So I think we're gonna have to get a third-party like 90-degree adapter for the USB-C. That way we can put the shroud back on. Phil's like, I really don't care that the shroud's not there. And he's like, when I see the score on Cinebench, he definitely won't care that the shroud's not there. Also too, fans max and auto. So we'll leave it on auto. It's also a max button here because for the fan headers, all the chassis fans are plugged into the built-in hub that's in the back. So this will control that, where it can be like, okay, auto means let the motherboard control it. Max says just put 12 volts to it and call it a day. So if Phil wanted while he's rendering, he'd just be like, max speed and done. And this button right here actually gives you apparently I don't know where it tells you, maybe an LED or something, but it actually measures the cleanliness of the front filter. So apparently it has some sort of a sensor in there that will tell when the sensor's dirty or the filter's dirty. It's kind of like a HEPA filter. Anyway. Cool. So all the chassis fans are plugged into the hub, which is plugged into the CPU header. The fans on the AIO are plugged into CPU optional. And then we have the AIO pump header plugged into the pump header on the motherboard. So Phil can go in here with fan control, or if he wants Armory Crate or whatever, and he can modify all of the fan curves as he wants. Holy crap, dude, the amount of air that's coming off. Nick, get the smoky thingy. Okay, so the Fantex D30 140 millimeter fans at full speed right now, pulling air from inside a chassis.
Jeez.
Right here in the vents. Look at that. This is positive pressure everywhere. As you can see on the top. All right, this is stuck on double zeros, showing RAM light. I've got to refresh myself on first post on the Threadripper. All the RAM is seated. I don't know if I need to do a BIOS clear or maybe a BIOS flashback on this, who knows. All right, so the board is older than the CPU. Timelines, right? Multiverse. Anyway, so we updated the BIOS, we did the BIOS flashback, it's done. Now we're gonna start it up and we're gonna do a timer on how long it takes for the first boot. We should progress past double zero immediately. So let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yep, 46, 15. It will now be there for about 10 minutes, I think, unless it's improved somehow. But I have a stopwatch going so we can see exactly how long it takes to go from there to the BIOS screen. So after 3 minutes and 49 seconds, BIOS is updating, because that's right, it has to do many levels of BIOS update. It went through all that time just to, now we're back at 15, to train the RAM enough to post to finish the BIOS update. Which is funny, because the BIOS flashback should have done all of that, but it didn't, clearly. All right, there we go. So we got to the FTPM spot. Took 7 minutes and 34 seconds to get there. So I'm gonna say yes to reset TPM, that's fine. Should take us to a very basic looking BIOS, because they tend to not even bother with making them. It's training again. Okay, so yeah, I actually didn't realize it's the 64 core, 128 thread version of the CPU. I wonder why it was $5,000. It was double the price of the 9970. And it's not even the highest one. There's a 9990 as well, which is I think a 96 core or something like that. So it was 11 minutes and 14 seconds to get to that point, by the way. Okay, well, let's see if it'll boot into Windows, and then Phil's gonna go ahead and do his rendering test to compare it to, I mean, it's probably gonna be nearly identical, to be honest, simply because it's happening on the GPU. But now Phil can play around with so many more things that might require CPU power. Like, hey, do you wanna set up like 100 VMs just because you can? You know, something like that. All right, here we go. Let's just see if it'll automatically configure Windows for us. Okay, so it's done. It's actually the next day. Phil's had some time to mess around with this, and he got a chance to use it in Adobe and do some workflow moving around, if you will. So one of the issues with Adobe typically is just, there's times it can hesitate, it can stutter, playback can suck. It's so quirky where he would have this whole like workflow that he has to do to get it back, right? And so far that hasn't been the case with this. And a couple reasons why we think that might be is because one, there's a load of RAM in there. There's 128 gigabytes of RAM, and he can just allocate 3/4 of that to Adobe if he wants. The fact that he's got 8 CCDs mean Adobe always has access to its own CCD if it wants it. Now, Adobe is not a good program when it comes to multi-threading. They have never really optimized the suite, if you would, to take advantage of more cores and more threads. It's just, they're so far behind the times when it comes to that. So initially he was kind of expecting there to be maybe a deficiency in performance because of the actual frequency change. Like he's going down quite a bit from having a 13900K down to a 9980X, right? Even though this would go up to 5.45 gigahertz, that's like one core in a certain scenario. When we ran Cinebench R23, it goes up to about 4 gigs all core. Now we haven't turned PBO or anything on yet, but this does allow PBO, and I think he should try using PBO just because that will help in Adobe even more. When it comes to rendering time differences though, we went from a 6 minutes and 27 seconds to re-render the 9850 X3D video down to 6 minutes and 1 second, giving us a 26-second benefit. How much do we pay per second? Let's see what that's gonna be. So, we'll just call it 11,500 rounded. It was a little bit higher than that. Divided by 26. $442 a second. Wow. Yeah, $442 a second. That seems worth it. I don't know about you guys. I mean, that's totally worth it, right? 26 seconds times that many videos times that much time doesn't make a damn difference, honestly. But to be honest, it's one of those things like we already had the parts. Like realistically, do I think you should run out and build an $11,500 Threadripper 9980X system to edit videos? Absolutely freaking not. It's funny though that there was any reduction in rendering time at all though, because most of it happens on the GPU encoder. But obviously when it comes to preparing the file and wrapping the file and all that sort of stuff, obviously the CPU and that many cores made a difference in some way. But yeah, it's absolutely, there was trade-offs for this. I mean, Phil's Intel system could boot itself in a matter of less than 20 seconds. This one takes about 1 minute and 20 seconds to boot. Now, it's funny that 1 minute and 20 seconds doesn't sound very long, but it feels like an eternity when it's 6 times longer than he was waiting in the past. Now, most of the time he just lets his system sit sleeping, which is fine because he wants to use Wake on LAN and all that sort of stuff so that if he's gonna remote in from home or RDC in or remote desktop client. So sometimes I'm like, hey Phil, I need you to sync these files because I need them at home. So he'll remote in from home, sync them to the server, and then the server will sync them to my sync folder, and then they automatically end up on my desktop. So that's just a neat system. And so he has to make sure his system's always online for that, mostly because I'm an idiot and I just have never set any of my stuff up to have access to it myself. I just rely on Phil. Otherwise, what's the point of paying him the bajillion dollars a year that he's worth, right? So anyway, let's talk about a few things though that I am excited about. I'm gonna rave on about these Fantex D30 fans, even though they did, sponsor part of this video by allowing us to put these fans in here and supplying these fans to us. But because of the design of the 6-pole motor that's in the Fantex fans, and I think I should probably do a standalone video about them, to be honest, because they're premium, but I feel like they would outlast a lot of the electronics that are in the system. But a quick high level, the 6-pole allows it to actually start at a much lower voltage, very, very efficient. So you can actually make them very quiet, but then if you want them to just go balls out at 2,500 RPM for the 140s or 3,000 RPM for the 120s, you can just brute force airflow where you need it as well. Temperature-wise on this, even running Cinebench, we were seeing the CCDs stay in the 50s, mid-50s to upper 50s in temperature, which is absolutely insane. And then the package was actually staying in the 60s. Think about the fact that it's pulling 350 watts while running Cinebench. That's pretty impressive for the cooler. And that's because of the fact that this cooler is not just a regular ass Asetek AIO. This actually has a cold plate, a true cold plate. The pump is not in the cold plate like it is for most Asetek AIOs. It's actually built into the radiator. So it allows there to just be a massive amount of density for the cold plate to be able to pick up that amount of heat. Because we went with the 420 over the 360, we have about the biggest cooler that we can fit on the Threadripper without going into an open custom loop, which we don't like to do because we want this system, specifically Phil's system, to be the easiest to work on if we need to change out a part or a component and getting it up and running. Because this system being down would be a problem for us because he would not be able to be up and running very quickly if we had to rebuild something. That's why we're probably gonna leave the Intel rig together, to be honest, as a true backup system for Phil. If something were to happen with this, he can just lateral over to that machine. It's a dupe of this when it comes to the OS and all that, so that's probably the best thing to do. The case, however, I'm a bit disappointed in this case, if you wanna know the truth. It's one of those, like, it looks really pretty, it's got plenty of airflow, it's got dual 200mm fans in the front, and it comes with a 140 in the back, which obviously we switched out to the Fantex D30. There's so many trade-offs where it just felt like this is one of those things where the designers of the case weren't actually building in it at any point. So for instance, to get the power supply in and out, you have to remove this shroud. But to remove this shroud, you have to remove this shroud. But to remove that shroud, you have to remove the cable cover thingy, which we didn't even put back in because I already showed you earlier in this video, it doesn't even fit with the Asus WS or workstation board because the USB-C header for the front panel connector that comes on this case is too tall to clear its own shroud, like its own cover. So it's like this series of events you have to do to get to the power supply. And we ended up realizing like this motherboard requires that the 6-pin and 8-pin header on the PCI Express lanes be plugged into a power supply. I had to take the graphics card out. Well, I technically didn't have to take the graphics card out, but I had to take these shrouds off again to plug in those cables, which just leads to a lot of teardown time. And anytime you spend on a desktop or a workstation, a desktop that's designed to be a workstation, any time you have to spend working on it is lost productivity. I mean, they went as far as to make the GPU installation completely toolless, except for the fact that you can't get your finger in to remove the latch that's holding the power supply or the graphics card down because a $1,000 motherboard for the workstation doesn't have a push button release, which their consumer product does. So these are like weird design choices that Asus made that I'm just kind of confused about, to be honest. But what I was getting into saying is like so many little things. Like I would have loved it if we could have gone push-pull with the cooler on the top, especially when we're talking about the amount of density that we have in this system here. Beyond that though, I mean, it's got great airflow. It's got things that are considered that I've never seen in other cases. Like for instance, how easy it is to get the filters off. The wireless antenna can actually be placed up in top of the chassis and hidden back here, because the orientation of this antenna really doesn't matter. It's pretty omnidirectional. So it actually lays flat behind the radiator and it's got this grommet pass through on the back so you can run the wire to it, which means you don't have this ugly antenna sticking around somewhere. It's actually self-contained within the case. So things like that are pretty neat. Not a whole lot of toolless aspect to it though. You saw I had to trim the power supply, AC connector because it interferes with this interesting design that they went with for the mount for the power supply. So it's got this kind of a weird diagonal bracket on there for a second hole position, which you wouldn't even use to begin with, because if you flip this power supply over, the fan would be against a solid panel. So I don't understand why they did that. Yeah, so it's a pretty solid build. Obviously it should be for what it does. It is, like I started to say earlier, they're parts we already had laying around. And I was like, dude, Phil, I asked Phil, I gave Phil a choice. I didn't force this upon him. I said, do you want to give Threadripper a shot? And we haven't used it around here on a day-to-day basis in years. And the last time he did, it was a not so great experience. So we figured we'd see if the desktop component the consumer component, like the Ryzen stuff, has gotten so good and has taken up so much market share in the last decade. Why don't we see how Threadripper has progressed? And so far today, he was kind of excited. Like he's having fun playing around with it and it doesn't feel slow. He says he's not sure if it's placebo, but it feels snappier in Adobe. I think that honestly could just have to do with the amount of system RAM that's available to it. And I think he should go into the control panel and just give it like 96 gigabytes of RAM. Regarding the power supply though, you might have seen on the table when I was going through parts that there was a Fantex Revolt X power supply. That was a 1200 watt power supply, and I just wanted to make sure we had way more headroom than we needed with this system, considering if we enable PBO and he does full CPU testing, which I know he's going to. Phil's the kind of nerd that will sit here now and find the limits of this Threadripper. He'll find where like he can tinker with this and just watch the numbers go big. He's like, dude, when my Cinebench number has 6 figures, it's freaking crazy. And I personally, when testing this CPU in our Gigabyte board, the Gigabyte Aero board, saw almost, I think it was over 130,000 score with PBO enabled. So that's pretty crazy, especially considering it's not the 96 core part. But 1200 watts, which is what that Phantix was, I was worried was gonna be too on the edge because of the fact that the CPU I know can pull 600 watts of PBO on, and so can the graphics card. And Phil does like to put together custom workflows where he can see how the system handles full load on everything. So headroom, 1500 was obviously gonna get the job done. All right, there we go, time to get on out of here. It is probably the craziest editing rig that we've ever built around here, but we tend to say that a lot. Like, we tend to say that every time we build one, but that's because every time we build one, it's a whole new family of products that is just taking things to the next level. The craziest part about it is obviously the price tag, because the last time we built a Threadripper system like this and you had full water cooling and all that, it was like, check out this $5,000 editing rig, and now it's double that. But again, almost half of the price is just the CPU alone, and then the RAM is a bit artificially inflated. All right, guys, thanks for watching. I know this build's ridiculous. Go ahead and just roast it in the comments below. I really don't care, because Phil's gonna be laughing all the way to 130,000 CB23 score.